And we are rolling.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board. My name is Cynthia Kress. I'm currently the chair of this board, and let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with approval of the minutes. I'm seeking approval by unanimous consent with two minor corrections to the December minutes. One is a correction of the misspelling of the word holistically, and the second is the repeated sentence at the top of page 2 in the first paragraph. Hearing no comments, the minutes are approved with those minor non-substantive corrections. That brings us to public comment. Do we have any? Come on up and introduce yourself and
Sure.
you can.
Oh,
So with the sound and the audio, the video, go ahead.
There were 2 minutes to approve.
I'm sorry, I said both of them in one fell swoop. I did. Yeah, okay.
Great. Perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
Oh, okay, I didn't, but I just want to be sure everyone understood it was an excused absence for me last time.
Oh, did it not say?
It didn't say unexcused, but it didn't say excused absence.
You're good.
Okay,
We'll move on to public comment once again. Let's just, should we be putting that? We used to put it in there, excused and unexcused.
Excuse me. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been differentiating personally in my own stuff, but if we want to do it on the public.
I mean, we used to, I don't know, you can ask the clerk. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another, but we did.
but I wasn't sure.
We used to.
Because
And we haven't had a lot of problem with that, but it is.
Yeah.
If it were to become a problem, it's kind of good to document that.
Yeah, you got to make sure you're not a problem.
You have to have the
Okay.
systems in place before individuals, you don't want to engage in something just because it's active, proactive. Okay, so welcome and please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Sure, thank you. My name is Victor Bellum. I live in 1105 Lewis Lane Southeast, way south on Front Street, which is kind of why I wanted to come here and talk to you today. I took a look at the list of projects on the transportation project, community improvement project that is starting to get reviews this year and approvals. And we're often forgotten down where we are in our little community. We're south of the Sycamore entrance. There's a little street to the left that's the Lewis Streets, right? And we're often overlooked. Actually, with the implementation of the whole Metro Flex service, we're not in range, actually. We can't use Metro Flex from our house, right? And why I wanted to talk to you today is because I've gone to city council a couple times to ask for some relief in our entry into Front Street South, because every morning when I go to work, it's almost impossible for me to get in because all the Issaquah Hobart Road traffic is just nonstop. And whatever the light on 2nd Street does, it doesn't stop that flow for us to even get a chance to incorporate. So usually we just have to wait for a small window and just hit the gas to see if we can do. And when it's icy or it's rainy, it's dangerous. I drive a big truck, and my truck sometimes just, sways trying to get into the road. And my son walks to the high school every day as well. And when people are, there's no sidewalk in our little street. So when he tries to get into the sidewalk, somebody's trying to run out. I mean, it's just, it's very propense for an accident there. And what I would love to see is somehow give us, I'm not asking for us to get, a 2nd Street access or anything, just give us some sort of relief so that we can safely incorporate, enter the traffic into the Front Street South. Because, and it's not only because I know that, there's probably about 10 houses in that area, but there's also a street that on the weekends it's packed, and they usually race through our street as well. And that's also, and we've had accidents actually there from people coming from Issaquah Hobart Road, trying to turn into 6th Street. And there was one girl a couple of years ago that just turned over her car into the corner house there because there's no way to slow down to make that right. So they come at 40 miles an hour, try to incorporate it into a 20-minute, 20 mile an hour street. Very propensity for accidents there. And a little curly, but that's the intersection that I was talking about. That's around, so you guys know where I'm talking about, but it's, yeah, it's something that we've gone to city council many times, here too.
Where's your house?
That's my house right there. We don't have icons, but this is the intersection. This is the Lewis Street, which comes into from south. And I was hoping to see some sort of project trying to deal with that intersection there, and there isn't. So I don't know if there's still a chance to evaluate anything, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. And thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Do we have anyone online? I see a hand raised.
Yes, we have Connie. Connie, I muted you, so you might have to unmute yourself.
Let's see.
Ha, okay. You should be able to hear me and see me. Is this true? Yes, okay, people are nodding. So I yet again looked through the criteria and I have some things that I think I've said before, but I'm going to say it again and again until you get tired of hearing it. And one of these is not in the actual criteria, but it's in a paragraph in the presentation that talks about even if a project is higher up in the priority list, if you get grant funding, then they want to be able to move down to a lower priority project because it has been grant funded. So the city of Issaquah has done this for a lot of years, and many times these grant funds come with matching requirements. And so while there are grant funds, it actually depletes the amount of money that we can use on other transportation projects. So I don't think it is as simple as that. We don't have pools of money in reserve to do large projects with because we sort of play whack-a-mole. And if we get a little bit of grant funding, we move on to a different lower priority project and we spend some of our money. And I think that those choices need to be considered very carefully because we have to actually save up some money to do larger projects where we won't get grant funding. And so while it's tempting to move to a lower priority project, it might not be the thing to do. And I don't think this paragraph accurately reflects the consideration that I would like to see there. So the next one is neighborhood streets. We have a lot of neighborhood streets that have traffic that move through them. In the scoring, it says if you reduce the impacts to negative streets, then you get a higher score. It goes to 0, but there's no negative number saying if your project is actually going to negatively impact the neighborhoods, then it would get a negative score, like a -1 score. And some of the projects that the city does actually do negatively impact the neighborhoods, and this is not shown. The last thing is parks. Parks and its interface with your mobility master plan has always been thin. The trails are not shown as part of the transportation network, nor are the connections to the parks really emphasized. They're still not emphasized well in the strategic plan. And so I suggest that the parks requirements actually get into the mobility master plan, and then you would be able to drop that weird parks thing and just include the and there in all these other plans, because you have one component that talks about it's in other plans, but then you call out the park strategic plan. And I think that's odd, and I don't really understand the emphasis. And I think there's a better way to solve that interface that was left out in the original formation of the mobility master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Do we have anyone else on? Okay,
That is all.
okay. All right. Well, thank you for those comments. We will move along to our regular business, and we're going to talk about the TIP project prioritization. Shall I turn it over to one of the Johns? Both of the Johns?
Or Greg and John.
Yeah, mostly Greg.
Introduce himself.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm Greg Lucas. I'm one of the transportation engineers in the Public Works Department.
Or
All right. Yeah, so here we're talking about our second of three presentations on the 2025 to 2030 6-year transportation improvement program. This one more focused on the project prioritization and the process going into that. This presentation will have slides on, I guess, one overlap of last month's presentation, what the tip is. We'll get into the process that we're using this year for the tip, which is kind of two-pronged. One was the CIP project selection criteria that was established citywide during the 24 to 29 CIP development. We'll get into the mobility master plan and the criteria that was established a few years back when that was implemented. We'll get into our discussion, the next steps for the TIP. The purpose of today's meeting or this presentation is part of the responsibilities in TAB identified in the city's code includes reviewing framework for prioritizing transportation capital improvement projects. And then it's worth noting a lot of work went into that MMP. It was established 3 years ago. So it's been a few years. Since then, the climate action plan has been adopted. Another note in there is that there is, the MMP is a living document. This should look familiar from last month's presentation. This just reflects what type of projects go into the TIP. And skipping through the legal mandates and all the plans, but just kind of highlighting the type of projects. We got the annual projects that are going on, the safety mandated projects, long-term projects. And here we're showing that what we're doing with this TIP is identifying new priority projects. The 25 to 30 TIP selection process, as I mentioned earlier, uses both the 24 CIP project prioritization matrix and the MMP. The CIP process carries forward. It's a consistent process that the entire city uses. So this discussion will focus more on the MMP and evaluation criteria in that. Kind of highlight what the since it's part of the selection or the prioritization. We'll briefly go over the CIP and the project selection criteria from that. That was the matrix style, and we'll get into an example of that. It had red, yellow, and green. And certain criteria for that. That matrix model communicates reasons why the projects are included for funding. And as kind of brought up earlier, it does help lower ranked projects jump other projects. That's an example called out. CIP was developed. And this is one of the sample criteria in the CIP, the legal mandate. So if the project it'll be identified green in the matrix. If it's mandated, or not completing project will result in a significant detrimental impact to the life and safety. Yellow is not legally mandated, and red. So anyways, a lot of criteria and a lot of projects. It spits out this in the 24-29 PIP, which is in the CIP. Again, this will kind of carry forward as a citywide implementation tool. But what we do have the opportunity to review and discuss today is, oh, go ahead.
Could you go back 2 slides, certainly reads what the red criteria is again? Legally mandated, not will not impact life safety or public.
Just explaining the color.
Yeah, so I guess the front and Sunset intersection left turn improvements isn't legally mandated, not impact life and safety. There's a couple highlights from the mobility master plan. Scored all the projects through a series of guiding principles. There was about 130 projects scored back in 2021. There was a 0, so up to a number of 78 out of 74 possible points. The average was 28. 27 of the projects scored 40 or more. It's a number that was used to help identify that they advanced multiple guiding principles and are consistent with the objectives. And the remaining projects still exist in there. They're just not funded or in the TIP. And so those are kind of the bullpen projects that can get brought up, and that list can also, future project can get added to it. They're just unfunded projects. And in the TIP or in the packet, there's all the listed projects that were in the 24-29 CIP, and then there's a couple pages of projects just with bullets, I think, that show which projects aren't currently, have funding identified. Those projects were scored; they didn't score rank high. Looks like the future year projects is what it's called out as. So the guiding principles were to improve mobility with Issaquah, then Issaquah, prepare for growth, connect to the region, promote environment, and invest wisely. And there's the points associated with each one. Most of them have, maybe all of them have 3 kind of sub criteria, and we'll get into those. Most of them are 0, 2, or 4, and the first 2 I think have some 4s and 6s, but kind of get to the end, then they're down to 4s. All right, so this brings us to our discussion today. We want to review the guiding principle and the associated evaluation criteria in the master mobility plan. I want to discuss if there's any minor adjustments to the criteria. Try to keep the points similar, but the descriptions are kind of what we wanted to focus our discussion on. And then we wanted to identify that since the climate action plan has been, a more recent plan, that they could spend a little bit more time on that category to make sure our master mobility plan is consistent with that. So I guess we'll kind of trial and error what the best way to go through each one of these is. A lot of information on each one of these. I can kind of read the guiding principle. It'd be kind of nice for us to all be on the same page. It's all in your packet too. We want to
Way in the back, almost the very end.
For the mobility master plan. Of course, it goes over 2 pages. But the first guiding principle is improve mobility within Issaquah. The description is to provide safe, accessible connection within Issaquah to provide near-term benefits to people of all ages, abilities, income, backgrounds, using all travel options. This one's divided into 3 with project evaluation criterion. First one is the project address a location with a history of fatal or severe injury or bike and pedestrian collisions involved collisions and or an FHWA approved proven safety countermeasure. This one has a 10, 6, and 2 and 0 option. 10 has a fatality, 6, 1 or more collisions, 2 if it's identified by the community, and 0 if no.
Doesn't the 2 reflects like a lower weight, though it's like an alert by the community? Like 2 is a bit low.
You think 2 is lower?
Like I would think be higher than 2. It says location identified by community, multiple reports with major safety concerns. That's like a low weight on such a remark.
We were talking about points budgeting in our pre-meeting, and you have way better memory than I do. I bet you do too. You remember our discussion about the concern waiting? Yeah, and also, I just want to take, and I appreciate your comment. I do want to take a pause and talk about a couple of things out of that meeting so that everybody else is caught up as well. But go ahead, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the consensus that we came to in our pre-meeting for this meeting is basically we're really trying to talk about the language of the criteria rather than, budgeting out the weightings of these criteria, because in that case, we're just going to be here for a long time because this is, everyone can have input about the weighting of each of these criteria, and they might say it's not enough, it's too little, or it's too much, but that's just going to keep us going here for hours.
So I would submit, though, that our main concern was that the whole thing has to kind of add up to the same thing. I would suggest that a workaround could be, do we have the right language in the right boxes? If we, in other words, we could say we could say, we could add language in the one that says number 6 that says, or something that has been consistently identified as an issue of concern from the community, and change the language that makes it. So one of the things that, thank you for reminding me, if we get into the changing the scoring, it kind of upsets a bunch of other downstream pieces of how these things have been evaluated. And what we were really hoping to do today is examine whether we think the right language is in here. And we had a special emphasis on environment. And we had another emphasis. What was our other, and I'm sorry, I came in a little hot today and didn't have my notes from that meeting.
I know we wanted to talk about this criteria. And
The safety.
I do remember the bulk of the conversation we did want to be on the environmental one. And so as we're budgeting our time, we should expect to spend more time on that one than these. And we don't want to be changing the point values. I think if we were ever to look at changing the point values, that's something we'd want to do over probably 3 or 4 meetings. And so for this, we want to keep it.
Thing to bite off.
Yeah.
But I do think, so one of the things that we may want to do, so we have, it's our only item on the agenda. We've budgeted some time. We've all set aside this time to dig in deep, and this group has, has the interest and capacity to dig deep. What I would suggest maybe is we in our pre-meeting felt that the environmental section had more material that we may want to re-examine. I think we should maybe finish this particular one, bounce to that one, see how long it takes us, and budget our time I mean, all of this could be examined, and this is, I think, a really appropriate time to do that. We also spent some time talking about the fact that this is in the master mobility plan, which was adopted by council in 2021. But we read through the language around that council bill that was put forth, and it is expected that it is not locked in. And like you said, there was a bullet that said it's a living document. And I went down kind of the rabbit hole of, is that thing an adopted thing we need to map to, or do we have the authority to, you know, massage language in that has been adopted? And the answer was very clear that we could, and that we are expected to. It is part of our responsibility, our duties as the tab. And so I would propose maybe back to Hanny's point, and then maybe see if there's a group consensus that we want to maybe, I mean, I think all of us probably can relate to what he just had to say and how challenging that must be. And, you know, I don't know how many of these we get, but it sounds like this is a pretty consistent issue. You can, everybody knows that intersection. Is that something, I mean, that is a safety issue. Is that something that we might want to consider changing the language of the one that had 6 points to include the kind of thing he's talking about?
So
Maybe that's a workaround, I'm not sure, but
just one question before I make my comment. Are the projects actually prioritized based on points, or is it only a cutoff?
So I would say we look at it holistically. So we've got the CIP color matrix that we look at.
citywide.
Yes, and that's citywide. And then we look at how these projects score with the mobility master plan, but we don't have a cut it off here. And for example, there might be a project that according to this criteria doesn't score well, but we really need to do. Maybe it's.
But if a project scores 2 points higher and moves up one in the ranking, it's not going to be like, oh, well, we better go do that one before this other one automatically, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So based on that and based on what you recommended, I would say what's probably most effective use of our time is to literally ignore every entry under the top scoring description. So look at the criteria itself and then the top cell for that criteria for now. Because at some point, we're really trying to decide what is maximum points, and to discuss what is 2 points lower or 2 points higher is not a valuable use of our time unless we get through everything. Right, and we can come back to it. Because this top score and this overall probably contains 90% of what we're trying to figure out. And if we need to come back, then we can do that. But I just don't foresee us, if we start to look at what's the difference between 2 points and 4 points, we're gonna spend an hour on 2 points that sounds like is not actually gonna immediately change the project. So same thing, start with this one, then go to environment, but just let's not focus on the difference between 2 and 4 points.
I think it's a really, really good point. I think I like the ideas of emphasizing the top. I think there's a big difference between 2 and 6 points. I think it just also has like a feel to it. It feels like it's not important because it only got 2 points on this thing, where safety is the main thrust of that issue. So yeah, so I guess I think that's a really, really good point. I think we should focus on the top ones, the biggest scorers, not nitpick down the bottom, but I don't want to limit us to.
Yeah, so maybe we can just take a note of it and come back. I'm just afraid of us getting wrapped up on plus or minus 2 points when we're here to talk about really, is this the right criteria overall? And so maybe we just take a note and say, let's come back if we have time and figure out if this is really the right weighting for each.
I'm kind of looking ahead. A lot of these become yes or no's and
Yeah.
a little more simple. I'll just keep that piece of context. This one seems to be by far the most complicated.
I think if we can get through
Okay.
Yeah.
safety and environment, I think the rest of them are going to go really fast. So we do have time to go through it.
Well, I think that we should keep that in mind and not get too down into the weeds, but I think that, I'd like to hear what someone else has to say about these, this language and, about whether we think this criteria, the language in this is right, whether they're, you know, at the right emphasis level, emphasis. So your opening comment, you think that that identified by the community is way too low and that should be bumped higher? Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
would say that. I felt that the grading system or scoring system doesn't go in a reasonable step.
Step.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Given the description.
Well, another good point about this, and not to undo what you just said, is this is a high value max. And so 2 is only 20% of the total possible for this category. So that makes it even, whereas, for example, the difference between 2, the next one, it only is a max of 6. So this is a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
The way it is.
Do the total points matter or the individual?
Well, it's a
category
weighted,
points?
yeah, well, no, because this whole category is 22 points.
Correct.
So
But do they weight the cat? Because like, end of the day, isn't it 2 out of 74, regardless of whether we're talking in this category or another category?
Right, so theoretically, if you change that to a 4, then you'd still be at a 74. It would just, that subcategory.
So if I understand what the discussion is, for example, 1.1 and 1.2, if 1.1 is really important, should those be categories like a 12, 10, 8, 6? 1.2 that may not be as important, could be a 2, 4, 6 or 6, 4, 2, 1. So that if it's really more important, it's going to have a weighted or set of points it's going to get. That may offset some of the other items that might bring, something that's really important might bring it down.
Well, maybe we should just recommend that 2 becomes a 4.
I would rather see the language under 6 include high priority community. Then we don't have to change any
I
points.
think it makes more sense because once we do that 4, once we change that to a 4 and a 6 or change up the length to 6,
It messes
then
up.
it messes up the whole thing and
I don't know.
start marking down.
Because,
Then we have to find 2 points somewhere else.
We
We
don't-
don't reallocate 2 points from somewhere else.
oh, you're saying, I see what you're saying.
It's out of 10 points.
It's out of
That
10.
is out of 10.
He's right.
If you want to assign that to be
He's right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
9 or
It's, you're not adding 2,
It's
6,
true.
and 10.
Yeah.
It's
true.
10 total. You're right.
It's true.
Yeah. I
Because
still
it's
think,
on that
I still
10
like
points.
6 better than 4.
You want to get rid of the entire 2 and you either get 10, 6 or 0?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. But what does the rest of you think? This is our job. We get to do this. We get to, you don't have to agree with me. What do you, go ahead.
So I've got a question for the group. What do you think is more important in terms of prioritizing safety?
Yeah.
Is it actual accidents at a location or reports that a location's unsafe?
Under different name. Kidding.
I feel like it should be definitely balanced, because if you focus too much on accidents, then it's just gonna be like, oh, someone got injured here, oh, now we have to fix it, versus like reacting proactively to concerns so that we avoid accidents in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that proactive approach. I think it just makes more sense to address problems before something dies on the road.
So how do you know if it's going to be a bad place unless there is an accident?
Because the community lives there and they do that every single day and that's their experience as people who live in this community. I also think that you could, maybe I'm all into noodling, but you could, isn't that what it means by multiple, like, what if we just had multiple collisions? So in other words, a small number of collisions or a fear of a small number of collisions is the 6 consolidating, and 10 includes one or more or multiple minor. If you have a lot of minor ones, then that should be a 10.
Yeah.
If you have a high fear of accident, that should be this, and you live in that community, that should be high. Everything's, we're at
That's
Mm-hmm.
point inflation.
what you call it, a near miss, so that's an
Exactly.
accident to happen.
And are those reported to the city? Do people report?
So we do have C-click fix where we do get that. Now, this is just me thinking out loud of the pros and cons of it. Is what I don't want to do, and this might not be a problem with this squad, but if there's a certain segment of the community that does not feel comfortable submitting concerns in C-click fix, then it's not going to show up as multiple concerns, whereas another neighborhood might feel more comfortable submitting their concerns. Maybe they're more organized. And because there's neighborhoods with very active HOAs, and we'll get lots of things from them. So what I don't want to do, and I guess advise me if you disagree, is I don't want to then skew it where a neighborhood with a powerful HOA can skew more projects to them, and a neighborhood without an HOA might not. It's the challenge.
Once you have a very qualitative measure that you're putting a lot of weight on. And it's how you're measuring that, your input to it. Whereas like the collisions, it happened or it didn't. So, I don't know, and this is where I'm saying the difference of 2 points doesn't make or break something. So it seems like we're all in the direction of this. Why don't you put it as a 4, come back to it later if we want to discuss it further. Because if we're talking whether it's 3, 4, or 6, right? 2 to 6, okay, at least that's 4 points different. 4 to 6 is literally 2 points. So
I'm concerned with too many neighbors with strong HOAs. It's more of a perception, could be more of a perception that they have as opposed to actual data. Something actually happened. They see something, oh, that could happen. And that expands. It was like, well, it actually, or did it actually? And then it's skewed that way. I'd rather be more data based as far as a decision. Like a lot of times near misses aren't reported. You just kind of custom square in your car and you keep driving. Thing, but physical accident or injury or something that's seen by the people that reported an incident, that's more data. It's kind of a hard sell because something has to happen before you have that data to be able to build it.
So I've got a question or an idea. What about looking at prioritizing projects in areas with characteristics of locations with high accidents?
So what do you mean by
Like road
characterization?
geometry.
So we did a local road safety plan about a month or 2 ago, where we looked at all the city's accident data over, I believe, a 5-year period. And we looked at whether it was a fatality, an injury accident, an accident, or pedestrians involved. And we started identifying characteristics of streets in Issaquah where we're more likely to have accidents. And that could be a way to meet the intent, because we're wanting to be proactive and address accidents before they happen. But we're also wanting to do it in a data-driven way.
Right, and so that's dependent upon that transportation engineer's decision about which roads are necessarily, have potential for accidents. But I believe you would probably, with your expertise, would know how to choose that.
Yeah, we started seeing patterns. So it's usually, a lot of times what it would be is a road that used to be a rural road and then became an suburban or urban road where we don't have curb and gutter, we have curves. Newport Way between Maple and Sunset with the ditches was one of the ones identified. The up in Squawk, going up 12th and Mount Olympus, that was identified. And so I forget which other ones, but we started seeing characteristics of certain types of streets that were more likely to have accidents.
Did we combine that data that we have with maybe also community input? Like if people are saying, oh, this is really dangerous, someone's going to die in this intersection, then we could delve into the data or dive into the data and maybe like confirm what they're saying or something? Would that work, or is that not really a good idea?
That makes sense.
Well, in a lot of ways, that is what we do when we do get the request through a Issaquah fix, is we then look at the data, we look at the accidents, we look at the characteristics of the street.
So I think something then that could be useful is if we somehow encourage people more to use the C-click fix thing. Maybe if like, I don't know, if we just put QR code printouts in the intersection for like walkers or whatever, like pedestrians, I don't know.
Yeah, think of those boards, parks.
I think of talking about that road geometry situation and, what perception is of the engineers about that is I'm leaning towards, including this 0.2 language into 0.6 and then having that road geometry situation to replace that into the 2 points. It's kind of like a scale of proactivity in terms of, is this identified as a situation where the road geometry is not good and it could lead to a propensity of accidents, escalates to 6 and then beyond that.
So isn't that then weighting a location where there's multiple collisions, the same as HOA reporting that because someone honked at them too many times? I mean, like seriously though, like that's what you do if you put that in the same category. That's not, I interpret collisions as that should be more important. There's an actual incident should be more important than any level of report.
Could we add in another, like maybe something in between 6 and 10, like put in 8 points or something? Or if there is like the like location of with one or more collisions of any type and severity, move that into the 8 point, and then put the like people complaining into the 6 point or something. Just so that it's a bit more even, I guess, in like there's more, so instead of having to put everything into 3 categories, it's more spread out, so there's more options and variety, I guess. I don't know.
So you'd have a 10, 10's as is, 8 would become what 6 is.
Yeah.
6 would be what 2 is.
So I just think we're spinning a little bit, and these are all really valid comments, but I think we're losing our way a little bit. What are our primary concerns? What do we not like about this? What do we agree is not quite right about this? Can we just level up for 1 second? And because I think that's, everyone's making kind of, I think, valid points, and I keep finding myself compelled by different arguments, but I feel like we're losing our way a little bit. What are our primary concerns with this?
The community isn't being heard well enough with the number 2.
But then the flip side of that is if you have community members that just have really big microphones, they get bumped higher.
Right, but the transportation engineers are the ones who kind of like make a decision whether that makes sense or not. Right?
Not how it's written right now.
Exactly.
I mean, they evaluate the information too, so maybe, maybe community input should be included with, transportation engineering knowledge.
So we want to be more sensitive to the community, but we also don't want to overweight. Well, no, we don't want to overweight just
Unbalanced versus.
people who happen to have big microphones.
So like including, I think it would be helpful to improve the weighting here, but also include or just create a new point category, which says if it's verified by road engineers that the road geometry is and leads to higher propensity of collisions, could lead to that.
What if we add in the one that's 6, and we can debate the number of points, but that just says or identified as having high characteristics of
The community. Transportation.
Well, I'm saying the community, the
Well,
community's gonna, we need to be I like the idea of being needed to be verified by,
The transportation.
the professionals who can identify characteristics.
Right.
So the problem with what the second one is that it doesn't have, potential collisions. So would we feel more comfortable if potential collisions were included in this second one as identified by the characteristics? I kind of like that. Because it takes some of the subjectivity out of it.
So you're saying we still keep two, community multiple concerns?
Well,
I don't know where you're headed.
I know, I'm sorry. What I basically think that is if the community brings it to the attention of the engineers and then they identify it as having characteristics and sort of validating it,
Yes,
then it ends up at 6.
yes.
And so community without validation stays at 2.
I think that's reasonable.
I think is where I'm at. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me.
Do we want to include a qualifier to that of like community input, just to tie that line of like community sent something in, engineers verified that this is actually true, that this road is possible for collisions, or do you think that's?
But I would then, yeah, because I would then be concerned that then we would be deranking if our traffic engineers identify this is a area of a lot of concern. Well, the community didn't also identify it, so it's ranked up there. So I think if there was like open language that sort of includes there, like the whole city is built on a foundation of listening to community. So if we say traffic engineers or something along those lines, I don't think we need to workshop it here. I think we're kind of getting direction, right? Then that it can be worded in a way that's community input could be a factor there without saying like it has to be a community recommended one.
Be reflected in a probability and occurrence, and then there's some quantification to grade that. That's how they measure safety, probability and occurrence.
Probability based on identified characteristics. So maybe summarize. Who can summarize? I think we kind of agree.
I think we were trying to change it pretty drastically, but I think the change is pretty simple overall. We basically just changed 6 to say location with or collisions of any type and severity, and identified to have a high possibility or high probability of collisions based on assessment from road engineering staff.
And that assessment can be instigated by the community, but we don't need to say that here.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I think it's.
I think it's strong, and I think, John, you saved us from being overly sensitive to community input. And I don't mean that we shouldn't be sensitive to community, but for it being outweighed and not considering other communities that don't have the same voice.
I think you brought the equity point
Yes.
very strongly, because I wasn't immediately thinking about,
Same.
hey, maybe like an HOA is directly asking people to
Right.
send and see quick fix things all the time. And other neighborhoods might not send those.
That's our next HOA meeting agenda.
So just checking in, Erica, are you tracking and are you comfortable with where we landed?
Yeah, I think so. My mind's also going towards, I'm blanking on the name now, but it's something that we covered a couple meetings ago, overhauling kind of the like the community input for, I think it was for traffic calming, and I just have that in the back of my mind as we're talking about weighting community input for this process. I guess if that is being revamped, I'm like trusting the process a little more. But yeah, overall, I am like in sync with what's happening with y'all over there.
Great.
Do we want to discuss this and or situation?
Can you tell me what you mean?
This project evaluation criteria, where I think the discussion at our pre-meeting for this was we were thinking that it was originally or ads, right? Or
No, I think it says and or in the mobility master plan. And the question that we have is, should we just change that to and? Because, and I don't think we would do this, but theoretically, a project could have the location of the accidents, but if we're not also doing the countermeasures,
So how does that actually work with this? Because that almost seems like separate criteria. Do you have to like check box 1.1 plus the 10-point box to get 10 points? Or just 1.1 like general guidance? Like, well, because that seems like its own criteria, right? Let's just say it was and.
right?
So project doesn't add FHWA driven safety countermeasures. So then does it not matter whether it's in a location with fatal severe injuries, we're just not doing it? Like, is that separate? Is that meant to be separate additional criteria?
Well, I take it to mean that we're identifying areas where there are accidents or a probability of accidents or concerns of accidents, and we're going to do something about it. And so if we had a project that was going to take a 2-lane road and make it a 5-lane road and not do any safety improvements, and this 2-lane road had 3 fatalities in the past 5 years. Well, that to me should not earn the 10 points because we're not doing anything to address the fatalities.
So it is then meant to be like an additional criteria. If that's not met, you get 0 points.
At least that's how I'd like to do it. I mean, I guess,
Just want to
yeah.
clarify so we can discuss it.
Yeah, so that's what I would prefer.
A question, when you say you're taking a 2-lane road and widening it to 5, I would think you would be addressing the safety of it anyway, when you widen it to 5 and designing it to incorporate the safety.
Right, I was just trying to simplify. I couldn't think of an example, but yes.
So let's say you're doing some drainage improvements along the side of
Right.
an intersection, but it doesn't do anything for the safety, but it happens to be located, so it somehow gets a bunch of points for being located, but the project itself isn't addressing the problem.
Oh, well, if the drainage is causing a backup where the road's flooded.
No, let's say it's not. Let's say it's not.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think we were just trying to avoid
okay.
a loophole, basically.
Right, yes, that's
So
exactly.
does that mean we need to take out or? If that all tightens up by taking out or?
Yep.
Is it possible to address a location, improve safety at a location, blah, 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 that is not utilizing? I don't know what all is included in FHWA. Like, are there a bunch of things that you could do that would improve safety that just aren't included in those proven safety countermeasures? Are there things that we want to do that maybe are not proven yet,
Yeah.
but are new recommended? They determine that actually driving faster is safer. And so then we say, well, we're not going to do it.
It's a great question.
I would say that would then go under an experimental project that we would want to have a long conversation with risk management.
Well, let me give a more realistic example. The bumps at crossing, we talked about these other.
Oh, the bulb outs? Or
The
the
little bumps you can feel, so you're acting.
oh, the truncated domes.
Sure.
Yeah, the
Yellow.
in the site-
Yellow section, yeah.
Visually impaired.
So at some point, those were probably not proven. Right? There was some point where they came out. They were in use, but not proven. So do we want to prohibit us from giving any points towards a project that implements things? Well, they're not proven yet. I don't know, because I just don't know what's included. I don't know how broad this FHWA is.
I would say it's pretty broad. And when it comes to risk management for safety, you really want to be going with things that have been proven to.
Would the city ever actually implement something that's not on the proven list if we're trying to address safety?
I can't imagine doing that. And like I said, it would. Okay.
I love how thorough your brain is.
I think it's a hypothetical. I don't want to.
Are we ready for 1.2?
Well, did we want to bounce to environmental? How long did that take?
It
us?
is 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think like the rest of these.
1.3 is definitely pretty quick. 1.2 has a little bit of meat to it.
I think we're gonna talk about 1.2 for a long time, but it is important, so let's do 1.2. Okay.
All right, 1.2 is the project increases non-drive alone options, especially for seniors, people with disabilities, and or people with low income, limited English proficiency, or low vehicle ownership. It's a lot of ands and a horn.
That's a lot.
What does it mean it increases the non-drive alone options? Does that mean like if you adding a bus stop, that increases it,
Yes.
period, even if no buses go there?
Oh, it wouldn't be
If no buses go there, then no, that does not. give them an option.
So is it then a pretty short list? Is it HOV lane, bus lane, and bus stop? I mean, what,
Yeah, sidewalks, bike lane, shared use paths.
Closing a gap. Creating a connection.
It's not.
so just not single occupancy cars, anything else?
Yes.
What if it comes at the cost, you are, I don't know, adding a HOV lane and it comes at the cost of making it worse for single occupancy vehicles. And that actually is a negative impact, let's say, on one of the communities that we're concerned about here. That's listed here because maybe more often commuting to somewhere where you can't get a bus to. Is that a good thing though? You did that.
I mean,
But depends if the HOV moves more people than the GP lane in time.
Well, but we call out specific groups of people.
Non-driver.
So I'm
low vehicle ownership people won't be able to drive by themselves. They'll maybe be able to carpool or take the bus, which goes to the HOV lane. The HOV lane carries more people because of that factor that you have to be in there with people in a single vehicle. So I think that addresses.
So do we know, like, with lower incomes, do we know that bus routes actually serve them well? I mean, it's yes, this is sort of a hypothetical, but you know that? The current bus routes? Because, so I'm thinking like, like my commute, for example, I couldn't in any practical way take a bus. It would be 3 buses in an hour and a half, period. I mean, that's the truth of the matter with how it currently is today. Maybe it'll be better tomorrow. And so if you were to make my commute worse by adding a bus lane, you've hurt me, right? Even though you haven't helped me at all, you've hurt me. So what I'm saying is, do we actually know that doing that always helps the groups that we call out?
The perspective is that this is evaluating the future projects and that that's the current status quo of you having to take 3 buses and transferring 2 times should be changed, and that we should be evaluating projects that are able, weight projects that are able to change that, so that you are also able to do 2 buses.
But if it comes at the cost, the thing is that's still considered a positive. That's all I'm getting at. And that could be the answer is yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
let me take it. So this is, I think, a really foundational, fundamental, core, strategic, value-based vision of the future. And it will continue to be worse for drive alone if we do nothing. Because there's more people driving. And it will, and so the MMP has a lot of language in there that is based on the fundamental belief that we cannot either afford nor do we want to pay what it costs to have twice as, to have the throughput for drive alone. So that's why it's based on the premise that so it's a 20-year look.
Yeah.
It's based on the premise that we cannot keep accommodating drive alone. It's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. So we have to provide other options.
So I think the answer then is yes, which is an acceptable answer. I'm not
Yeah.
disputing that it's an acceptable answer. I just want to clarify that that is in fact an acceptable answer. It sounds like, yes, it is. That's an okay trade-off. We're okay with that trade-off.
And I think that that's woven throughout the MMP, I would say, is that you cannot avoid some short-term harm for the individual driver if you put in a bus stop, if you put in an extra HOV lane, if you put in traffic calming. But you will ultimately, and that's why it's called the master mobility plan. You will move because we want to move people. We're not in the business of only moving cars, or like in the future, it's moving people and goods. And so I think
yeah, and I guess I was trying to connect that back to an actual equity analysis, which is, do we actually know that this is better for groups that we would do an equity analysis for? That's so I personally don't know the answer to that. I think we're making a little bit of an assumption there. Maybe we do know the answer to that.
I mean, I have a master of urban planning with an emphasis on transportation, infrastructure and land use. And so, there's a huge equity issue with the number with drivers versus people who have, I mean, flight out of the cities. I mean, it just, I don't know, I guess it's a very broad, each and every project, I'm sure has its own research, but.
I think we can actually hunt a lot of this because of a future conversation. So we're starting up a new work plan that will eventually come to the tab, where we're going to be asking the question, does the city's concurrency policy align with the guiding principles of the mobility master plan? And as part of it, concurrently to evaluating concurrency, we're going to be asking questions like transit priority signals and leading pedestrian intervals and things like that, that would actually do what you're talking about, Micah. And where it'll take longer for the car to go through the intersection if we're giving priority to the bus or the leading pedestrian interval. So we will be having a more detailed discussion of it. And
I think he's trying to make sure that these things do help deliver
Yeah.
mobility to these
I
populations.
defer to your expertise. I'm not
I'm not
questioning
an
it.
expert, but
Yeah, I don't know. You came across it. You sounded like you had authority. So I defer to your expertise. I believe you on it. I agree. We can move on. I just wanted to ask the question, but because I don't have that expertise.
I think that we need to always be asking the question to make sure that the strategy that delivers against the goal. But I think it's also fair to challenge assumptions, because professionals can get a little bit into your own feedback loop, or your own echo chamber. So I think it's a really fair question. And I think maybe it's so widely agreed upon that we're not even asking the questions. Does this deliver against this as well as we want it to? So I would encourage you to keep asking these questions and don't listen to people that say they have a master urban plan too closely. But I do think that it's a fair point, which is it's so ingrained that it's like assumed. And I think we just need to make sure that we're always asking those questions. Does that project deliver against the population, the benefits of the population that we're trying to? So I think it's
Super quick on the leading pedestrian signals. Is that at the next meeting we're talking?
no, we got to sign the contract first with their consultant.
So 4.2, we want to go through the scoring. 6, closes a gap or creates a new connection that accommodates walk, bike, transit trips in a location that serves people with high needs. Or kind of similar, closes a gap or creates a new connection that accommodates walk, bike, transit trips, or reduces location that serves people with high needs. Two, it just reduces modal conflicts, crossing. Zero, it's nothing.
One is an and one's an or. Is that what the difference between these first two?
I've read it a few different ways myself. I don't know if the people with high needs carries to the
Or
next
expands. That's second part option. Or lowers the bar.
Yeah.
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 Thoughts? Good. Point three is a simple yes, no. Project could be implemented within the next 6 years, including implementation as a reversible and adaptable pilot.
What's that mean?
I'm trying to think of examples.
History of why that got tacked in.
Well, I'm going to take a guess. We've got some projects that are multi-years. In fact, we got Greg's heading up a planning study to identify a crossing of I-90. That's a project we can't do in the next 6 years. And the guiding principle that we're looking at is improve mobility within Issaquah today. And so while other projects like the I-90 crossing will score great across lots of different criteria, it's not going to improve mobility within Issaquah today. And that's what we're trying to do with this guiding principle. And so I think that's why we give 6 points, because we do want to say, yes, we do have these big aspirational projects, but let's get something done now that makes a difference for the people who live, work, and play in Issaquah.
Almost wonder if 6 months is too long. We can get it done. It should be a good priority. If it meets the deadline.
But that could turn into a situation what we do is projects that take 6 years or less, and then we start even gaming it where contractors start thinking, oh, I just got to bid 6 years and then I'm gonna get it. So
It makes it harder to get the big ones that are important. But those will score.
But what does implementation as a reversible and adaptable?
That's what I was trying to think of an example of, and I did think of one. There's at the Bellevue Transit Center, it took away a general purpose lane, and then they added bike lanes in each direction with these like removable planters that protect them. And so that's a pilot that's going on that in a couple of years could be reversed. That's an example.
So
Okay.
when you say
It's a test.
including, it could get this criteria for either being able to be implemented in 6 years. Or.
That's the way I read it.
Or is it also it has to be able to be implemented in 6 years, and it has to have a reversible pilot.
No, to me, it's implementable in 6 years, and this also includes a reversible pilot. So the reversible pilot would have to be done within, yeah.
We should do it.
I would almost take that out to say, could it be implemented within 6 years? Regardless of
If you're like reversible pilot,
And
like,
not even say, that's a good point.
What were you saying?
If you're like added lane to a road, I feel like removing that lane would be a huge hassle, but I feel like it's a small road, you could realistically add a lane within 6 years, right? It seems so. Or that's a really bad example, but if you're like, the project on Second Street and Bush where they kind of changed the sidewalks up a bit at that intersection going to where the high school is, how long was that project? Like, would that fall in this under 6 years category as an example?
Of one that got done in less than 6 years?
Yeah.
Yes,
So I feel like that's not really something that'd be reversible
right.
because they changed all the concrete and stuff. So I don't see exactly why it was reversible. It's a huge concern.
I don't know if it was that, but maybe it's telling us as staff, don't forget to think about ideas outside the box that we can test and reverse.
Basically, you have a project, the actual project, if you're to fully implement it citywide, because that's the project, would take you a decade. But you can do it, you can do a pilot. for it. So I just think that including that there's probably just like a 2 or 3 word change that makes it clear that it's not like meant to be a project within 6 years that includes a reversal pilot.
I like Tom's idea of just removing that whole reversible.
I mean, because if it's a time pilot, whether you're doing 6 years.
You can just roll back the project. Then
Yeah.
meet 6-year criteria.
It would meet the 6-year criteria and
I think that's.
Yeah, a pilot could be a project, right?
Yeah, because that's, we did that for Old Town Traffic Calming. We had a pilot project where we put down a bunch of temporary devices and then it resulted in a permanent project.
Like it.
So we're just taking that out.
including input, yes. Because who scores this? It's the city of Issaquah. You know, the employees, you know, your transportation group scores it, right?
Yep.
So you know. Right?
We're through the first guiding principle. Now we'll jump to the promote.
It's 17, yeah, let's go to 4.
So we're good on that. We're gonna take on that. The comma will become a period and the rest of it comes out.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, 4.2, it just doesn't make sense, because couldn't you be having a project that's purposely in an area with a sensitive water quality to where you're improving it with that project? And you're building runoff, like street runoff protection to divert it away from a stream. I don't know, right? Could there be something that it actually improves the situation and we're giving it 0 points because it is in that area?
Well, how about before we have the discussion, I think Greg's got some things to present on this. But we did hear you.
Yeah, I think we can massage the language, yeah. All right, so, yeah, we got the climate action plan. Within that, it's got a transportation and land use goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for transportation and improve community mobility through sustainable land use planning, accessible multimodal transportation options, improved cycling and pedestrian networks, and expanded EV infrastructure. It's also got some pretty aggressive targets to 15% increase in non-drive alone load share, 2017 to 2030, and a 20% decrease in vehicle miles traveled by 2030.
13, plus than 13.
That's a question.
No, it's 6 years.
VMT is usually per
Oh, fine,
capita,
17.
or we're talking total. So we saying, I mean, that's really aggressive if it is including an increasing.
You know, I asked that same question and I think I was told per capita, but I want to verify because if it's not, that's huge. And even if it is per capita, it's still huge.
Yeah.
Be interested to know how much we're on track. How we measure it?
Well, in 2020, we're doing great.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You also have here, you have these outside factors that no matter what you do, you know, companies start saying, go back to office.
Yeah.
How are we measuring that?
I don't know. I've actually been looking into how to measure VMT and got a few ideas for how to do it. But I think it would be good to measure it.
One more slide and then we'll get it. So some of the strategies were to decrease auto reliance through sustainable land use planning and encourage dense mixed-use development patterns in central Issaquah and nearby multimodal transportation networks. To reduce overall automobile use by promoting biking and walking and shared and public transportation options. The third one is to reduce emissions by expanding EV infrastructure, facilitate transition to So for 4.2, if we want to hop back into that, I don't know if we want to consider or a project avoids or improve sensitive, something.
I do find it interesting that for that first criteria, we treated that 1.1 box as like a yes, no, and if it's a no, it gets 0 points regardless. Now we're having that box be the same thing as the scoring. Just a little side comment. But I stand by what I said earlier, which is that I do think that there are projects, pretty sure I've seen some in here, that actually improve things like protection from runoff. So isn't that a good thing? Is that something you want to do?
So I would say that a lot of times ones that are solely for runoff treatment are considered stormwater projects. And so that separate bucket in the CIP. So this would be a transportation project where then when we have our stormwater requirements, we basically go through and the manual says the different rules that we have. Okay, you need to treat this much of it, you need to detain so much and.
But you're saying avoid the area.
Right.
So any project that's near sensitive area for water quality, is it having a project near a sensitive area for water quality bad for water quality, period? Can there be a net positive?
Ends.
And is water quality the only criteria, the only characteristic?
Water quality, I think you wouldn't even be addressing unless you did have a project. But I could see where there could be a case that the project, as you're improving the project, you can improve the tension of water and treat it as a runoff. And that could be an option for improving quality of the water that's going to run off the road where you have a catch basin or filter system. We can remove some of the hard metals before it's released to create.
And if you're talking about, it's trying to go to more multi-model, if you're doing something that's gonna cause people to bike on that road instead of drive, you're releasing less particulates because you're not driving. So when you say, yeah, it'd be great to have that in the location of sensitive water quality.
Erica?
Is fish passage, anything like we would want to include on this? I don't know if that falls underneath this sensitive category. I also don't know how many, like culvert, like either like old culverts or blocked culverts that Issaquah has. I know that that's a huge issue at the state level and the funding for that and whatnot. And I just don't know enough in the weeds, like locally, what that means for Issaquah, but I don't know if, that would fall underneath any of these categories.
Should that be improved sensitive areas as opposed to avoid?
There you go. Love
Yeah,
it.
I think that's a good point. And
Yeah.
then I guess one question I have is sensitive areas for water quality is one of, right, there's other environmental concerns that we have as a city.
Place a cover with a small bridge. I mean, a lot of it would be, I mean, you can't avoid any sensitive area almost these days, so it'd be more improves it.
Right.
Improving habitat, improving water quality.
Yeah. So somehow water quality got in there.
We just say sensitive
Yeah.
areas. Oh, let's-
The word water quality.
Is water the only concern, or is also like removing trees and stuff like ferns and all those vital things to ecosystems? Or is that also, shouldn't that also be a concern?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's why this is limiting. I think we should can it.
Well, you can use improve,
Or just
avoid
say
sensitive
improve
areas, but then you need to.
No, it's
Oh, the water
limiting.
quality.
Yeah.
Then you could define sensitive areas better than water.
It'd be a long list, but you say improves
Sensitive areas,
sensitive areas, right?
right?
So we could use the term critical area because our city code talks about critical areas. We have wetlands, streams, slopes or geological hazard areas under it. The critical area aquifer, we've got, not that it's defined as a critical area, but we have code for protection of trees. So there's lots of different environmental aspects that we do have code for in the city of Issaquah that we said is a priority to protect.
I like critical area because aren't there already like regulations for how many trees you have to have in a certain area as part of a new project, right? Isn't that already controlled?
Yeah.
So if this is something to be specific and not actually define what the project design is like, wouldn't we just want to have it be more, you know, what are the higher level hazard, not just trees, green space, in general, right? Like the critical areas, environmentally critical, maybe we want to say, just to clear the.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a definite meaning between sensitive area versus critical area.
So
Would be-
just want to make sure that we're not too hemmed in with whatever the C. the
Right.
areas with the capital C and the capital A.
Well, and then I guess the question then I would have is how to go about things that are required by code. So if we're within let's say we're disturbing a wetland, then we have to go through the mitigation sequencing for that wetland. And so on one hand, you could say, well, they're building wetlands. On the other hand, well, we're building wetlands because the rules say we have to build wetlands.
But I think that still comes back to enhances or improves because a wetland alongside a road is really not going to do much. If you can bank it into a wetland that's actually be a larger piece and actually do a better quality in a bigger area that is more for wildlife that can actually use the wetland, where they're not going to use the wetland along the road. But so you may not be improving that piece right there, but if you're using a wetland bank for the agency, this spot, it's still improving the overall environment area. So it's still being improved. I think I still like, I'm not sure if anybody else does, but I like the word as far as enhance or improves.
I like the enhance, but I also think it should be net, because presumably if you have to permit project and you have to mitigate the impact, then you're bringing it back to zero.
Right.
And so that's not a net enhancement.
Well, sometimes you have to do it 2 for 1. So if you're impacting something, you're going to be improving. If you impact an acre, you have to improve 2 acres.
But that's because somebody has decided that you need to not, in order to truly offset your impacts.
Right.
It's because the permit agency can't extract more mitigation than by law, than the impact. Somebody's deemed that it needs to be 2 for 1 because it's so bad that you did that, that you've got this other stuff over here, you gotta need twice as much to equal that. And so it's still meant to be a net offset. Whereas are we saying it needs to be a benefit? Are we saying that? Are we talking about what the permit agencies would require? Or are we talking about above and beyond?
Above and
Well,
beyond with the permitting.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
That's my question.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's how you would get a better score. If you do better than what the permit agencies do.
So let's take that for a minute. So if you do that, okay, you do a road and you're doing some impacts and net zero impact. So you're not getting a benefit on this environmental mark.
Right.
But if you're doing the road and you're actually, or we found a way that we can actually put a bridge there and so we can get wildlife crossing underneath, ducks and packers. And so that's actually a better improvement because they would not have been able to mitigate. So then you get more points for that, even though the impact might be the same, but you're actually doing something a little bit more. So I like the idea of, like if it's a net zero, okay, then you get a 0. But if you do something that's going to enhance a little bit more, then you get more points for it. And that would have to come out of the bottom.
And improve sensitive.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense because it's gonna be required anyway. So why should you get points for something that's required?
So here's a hypothetical, and I really liked what Erica said, the fish passage. So Newport Way, SR 900 to 54th Street. There are fish barriers on that corridor. And as part of the requirements for getting through the environmental process, we do need to take these fish barriers and replace them with either box culverts or bridges. So on one hand, I feel like we're doing it because it is required as part of being able to get our environmental approval. But I also feel like, feel free to disagree because this is why we're asking your opinion, but so my opinion doesn't matter as much. But I also feel like on that project, someone could say, well, it's actually improving it. So it's taking it from a negative, it's a barrier, and now the fish can go through. So yes, it is being required, but in my mind, that project would deserve the 4 points. And I guess, do you agree or disagree that a project like that, well, it's doing it because it's required to, it's.
So
Is
for
there-
example,
Uh,
you're
So
still letting
it's-
water go through, that would be the zero balance. You're letting water and fish go through, that's the.
Right.
But it
Is
is
there
a
a way to-
requirement,
It's,
so you get extra benefit for it.
So the objective is to protect or maintain. Then
it's actually to fix something that was broken a long time ago. And then they're on the hook for it now, just like, it's a whole, this is really
So let's
nuanced.
just say the code does require an improvement. Isn't that a good thing? Don't we want to then give some benefit to the project that's gonna improve it?
Yeah.
And so that's where I think fretting over what code is, when code could change, it will change.
Is this part of the Culver case? Is that that whole, is that why?
Well,
The major,
so that project, it has federal funds, and so then it goes through a different process. Now, although I will say now that our city code, it would actually require two, my understanding of it. But originally the nexus was that the tribes were asking for it.
yeah, well,
and
they've
so that's-
won. in-
Right. So
the-
now the injunctions against the state, although it could eventually say, well, cities are out of the state, so it's something we have to take care of eventually too. So,
Even though it's, yeah, that what Culver's is a messy example.
yeah,
Everything that I said about it, you have to offset, you have to mitigate your impacts. This is different. This is when you're in there doing the work, you have to fix it
right.
because it was broken before, which is different than mitigating your impact for the project. So I think
This is a little tricky because it's, right now they sue the state, so the state has to.
exactly.
So anything they get funds has to, but they don't have state funds and, you know, they don't have to, but the tribe will come out to the counties and the cities next. Now, they want the state. So it will go down to everybody at some point to be fixing the code. So it's good to be able to fix it now. So I would still say that's, if it's city funds and not required by federal funds or state funds that you're using, that will have those.
But it is required.
This just got really messy for me.
The city is requiring it now, or? who's
Well, so this isn't my area of expertise, but when I read the critical area code for streams, it did talk about stream crossings are allowed, certain classifications of stream. If you do a bridge or you follow Department of Fish and Wildlife, they have some guidance and allows for box culverts, but basically it's saying remove these barriers is my understanding of it. Now, one question that I have as I think about this is how much of our funding could we actually use to go above and beyond what is required by city code or state or federal law? And so if we had a project that we were trying to do extra for,
You heard it justify unless there's a big benefit to public something.
Yeah.
right?
What if we just say that it's a net benefit? Because anything that is separate from the culvert case, anything that's offsetting impacts is not a net benefit. And the culvert example is a net benefit. Even if it's required, it's still a net benefit. It's tapping into a whole nother history of, this situation with this state, tribes suing the state over the culvert. So what if, isn't that all? I'm just trying to find a way to bring it back around and make it simple again. It's a net benefit, even if it's required, it could still be a net benefit. So couldn't we just use net benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're stipulating that net zero is like what's required under the law, right? Just offsetting the impacts of a particular project. And that benefit will be going above and beyond what you were saying.
Even if
Yeah,
it's
I don't
required.
know if
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think even if it's required, it's gonna be a benefit.
If the law requires an improvement, why do we discount that? Let's say you have two projects you're trying to decide between. And one of them, the law requires an improvement that's significant. And one of them, the law requires no improvement, but it's gonna make a small improvement. Why would you pick the one that makes a small improvement over the one that the law requires a large improvement?
But that's included, I mean, when we're looking at the CIP bucket, like the lawful need of a particular project is weighed in that particular bucket for overall CIP process. And so I'm not.
I still think you're then inappropriately discounting the good a project can do just because it's required.
I think there's two reasons projects are required. One is because they have a negative impact that has to be mitigated. And another is because there's this other outside thing that happened where every time you touch something, you have to.
I'm not thinking about a project that you're doing it because it's required to do the project. I'm thinking about a project that working on a road.
Yeah.
And when you touch that road, you're required to improve the environment around the road, right? Okay, so the law requires and the code requires you to improve the environment around the road. And another project doesn't have that requirement. And you make a small improvement just out of the goodness of your heart. Which one is better? You choose the one that's a small improvement because you give it points because it's an improvement over the requirement. This is where it shouldn't be
I'm not talking about whether it's required. I'm talking about whether it's a net benefit
net to what?
but to no project.
To no project. Fine with no project, but isn't that
No,
the same
so-
thing as just saying it improves?
No, I see what you're saying. If you didn't do the project and whether it's creek or runoff or treatment, I'll stay the same. If you did it, and if you did a project, you would improve it. I would think that would be. Yeah, I lost my exact train of thought what I was trying to go there, but I was trying to figure out a way that you can still do a project where you may not have you might have a net zero benefit, or you could do a project that would have more of an overall benefit. I think that would be the one that would score higher than the one that might have a net zero.
Yes, regardless of whether code requires that benefit or not. That's my point.
Yeah.
Because you were saying beyond what's required.
Because the lawful need of a project is already stipulated in the capital improvement
But-
plan criteria.
But there's a difference between the project is required to be done and the specifics of the project. So if you say, well, only if it's above what's required, then you're going to discount any improvement that could be required, which is, I would rather have an improvement.
It's a net improvement. I just think that sometimes you do some nice things and it's really, you gotta go all the way back and say that's
I'm
how
with
much.
that. My concern is over saying it has to be more than what is required or by code or by whatever, right? Because I don't want to have a situation where you're devaluing a project that's a significant improvement just because code said.
I think the points go into this as well. Like it's 4 points, it's not gonna be a huge, like if it were talking about, if this did have the higher point value, I think it wouldn't be as useful to do that net. But I think this 4 points just says like, it can get you over the line somewhere, but
I worry about above and beyond, because that requires additional funds to do more than what the project is originally scoped to do. And that may be hard to do. I like it where there's, if you do nothing versus a benefit, but whether it's required or not.
I agree.
So that grading system, if we say 0 for the no, 4 for maintaining or protecting what's existing, and then another scoring for doing the extra benefit that we're talking about, is that a way to solve it?
I don't think it should be maintained because that's gonna be required by law anyway, and you can't engage in a project and not have it,
So,
you're not gonna use your.
yeah, so it's either a yes or a no. In this case, it's a yes. But that's project avoids sensitive areas more, like project maintains or protects critical areas. And then, you know, another one in case of the extra benefit that it could be there.
I'm sorry,
Points.
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so could you
Thank
just
you.
do like, basically like a 0 where it's like no? Cause it's out of 4 points, right? So 0 is no, 2 is existing, that 4 is avoid sensitive areas. And I think we should remove the water quality, as we were saying, and just do it like avoids critical areas. And then 4 is improves the critical area that project is around.
So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking if there's a 0 or improves or enhances. So there might be a 0, 2, and a 4.
Yep.
Yeah, 0 avoids the.
So it might be basic improvement. And if you go above and beyond or really enhance something, then that would be
An extra.
Yes, I
or
don't,
more points.
I mean, then if the defined point enhance or improve it.
I was gonna say, yeah, could we have one that just, cause I'm having the same problem. Is that what you really mean? Cause I'm wondering what you mean is, maintain for 2.
No, you meet legal requirements for 2.
But we're not gonna, no project's gonna be can't be worse. We do a project, you can't do it, right?
Right.
So you can never have a maintain as anything but a 0. Otherwise, you're just artificially boosting everything 2 points. Every single thing. And so then you've actually devalued improving by 2 points by doing that. So I think we should just do 4 points with what you said earlier, the improving sensitive area, critical area.
Sensitive or critical, so in case it doesn't fall in the critical areas ordinance, it's still.
Yeah, we can do that. And we are gonna talk to the environmental board about the environmental criteria, so we're gonna get it.
Tell the transportation group has some ideas for
As long as we get rid of the water quality specification, I think we're
Yeah.
hugely improved.
But
So-
we're gonna keep the score 0 and 4.
We're gonna add it to.
And so we're looking at, you get 4 points if you have a net benefit
Or avoids?
or avoids.
Or what?
I thought I heard it. All of those. Okay, net benefit. I don't think we can avoid it. I still think that needs to be improves or enhances sensitive areas.
Okay.
Avoids, I mean, you're just not gonna be able to. You're gonna be in it anywhere. Yep, yeah.
Okay, well, it's critical. Approved ordinances. Sensitive. or critical.
And that would take out the water quality, so.
Yeah. I think-
Yeah.
Might make it,
Can hear you.
might make it 1.1 as well.
Oh,
Maybe 5 could be secure federal funding to pay for them.
So we hit that note, jumped right to 4.2.
sure did.
4.1.
Do you have recommended or suggested wording for this? Your suggestion, do we want to modify to incorporate those targets?
Well, I guess though, I haven't fleshed it out, but do we want to also consider projects that would reduce VMT? Because right now we're giving points for reducing single occupant vehicles.
Feel like we already are giving points for reducing other categories we just talked about earlier, 1.2, for example, so.
Well, Micah, I'm gonna actually go back to what you were mentioning earlier, because you have a commute where you have to drive to work, you can't take the bus. And there could be a project that actually would add vehicular capacity that would reduce vehicle miles traveled. And so I'm going to go back to the I-90 crossing. That project would reduce vehicle miles traveled because,
You don't have to go there.
right. So that,
I like just, can we get away with just adding VMT language to this criteria?
just add it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah,
Does that work?
that's what I think makes the most sense.
In the evaluation criteria or the scoring?
I think the scoring.
So I think the scoring, but I think that it leaves it more open-ended for things we haven't thought of yet. If you take out the including shift to non-auto modes, that just seems gratuitously specific. Because really, the whole point about this is if as long as it encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment,
Thinking,
do we care how that gets done and shifting to non-auto mode?
So like, basically like a project that involves EV chargers. or
Right,
something,
exactly.
you can argue is should be included.
Right. So it should be,
But then
so
your scoring. though, then you
emissions,
have
is
to-
there anything about emissions?
You have to change your scoring too, because otherwise.
Emissions needs to be included there too.
Counts, but it doesn't reduce single occupancy vehicle use at all, and so you still get 0 points.
How about,
scoring more walking in a neighborhood or for shopping versus using the car?
well, that would include vehicle miles traveled being decreased. Yeah, and also already, isn't that already covered in reduction of I think reduction of SOV use.
That seems so negative though.
Oh,
You see, and I was trying to be positive by saying, well, what would you do other than SOV use? You would use transit, you would use
but
biking
don't
and
forget,
walking.
but don't forget, this is trying to make sure that the travel is less impactful on the environment. And so it's less impactful on the environment if you have reduction in SOV, reduction in VMT, and reduction in emissions.
Sure. But you could have electric vehicles.
You're also polluting. Rubber tires.
Yeah, they're heavier, they release particulates more than fast cars.
Keeping people employed and mines. Joke, it's not a good thing.
They're paying for their charging stations, and they should be paying for
Okay.
Jeez. Wow, okay.
So,
them. And not paying for gas fund.
That's a problem. So where are we at with this? Mhm.
I think I agree with what you're saying, this overall criteria is about being less impactful on the environment. So why do we need to even specify?
Prescriptive.
Yeah, uses this single occupancy vehicle use. Is there some way to just kind of broader cover? Because
Would that be MBT then?
if multimodal transportation,
I've got a,
We are inflating the criteria, maybe points at that point if we're broadening this category because we wanted to. I mean, I guess the guiding principle is technically just to embrace the environmentally responsible transportation system. So in that case, you could have that broadened category. Not sure.
I mean, is the environmental goal for the city really just to have fewer single occupancy vehicles, or is that a way to achieve the environmental goal?
I've got an idea. Greg, can you go back to the climate action slide? Let's go to that one. Is there a way to incorporate by reference the transportation and land use strategies from the climate action plan? Because this one talks about, or I'm not sure whether it's this one or that one, I was wondering if there's a way to tie it into the climate action plan, because that talks about EV charging, it talks about reducing automobile use. Having the,
It's an existing thing that gets maintained, and so if there's changes in the future, that gets rolled in. Like if you just reference if your point's related to an action plan, but don't call out something specific in it.
Can I take a crack at it? What,
yes,
some of these just have an a thing on the left and on the right, is this yes or no? What if we just said, project encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment, period. 4 points, yes. 0 points, no.
not sure.
I mean,
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah.
That sounds like a
No, I
good
like
idea.
that.
because everything else seems too prescriptive. Am I using that word correctly?
Not to mention commuting and peak hour, like the curves are all over the place now, so we don't even really have necessarily peak days.
As someone who's going to be looking at how to score projects, I like that because it simplifies it. It makes it easier when we're sitting around a table or on Teams trying to say, does this project get 4 points or not?
It's yes or no.
Yeah.
And I know that's in 2020. This peak hours. It's changed up, just obviously, your work schedule changes.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, a project that would move to this use to outside of those is actually gonna be useful because everything has already been moved for the most part outside to peak hours.
We did it. All right, so 4.1 on read project encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment, period. 4, yes. 0, no.
Yes.
I like it. Simple. 4.3 is pretty simple also, as it's written, projects included in the park strategic plan.
She thought that, he was just asking me was Connie mentioning, so a public comment came from Connie Marsh, and she was saying that why call out just the park strategic plan, right? Isn't that what she was saying? She thought that should be, language be changed to other plans, in other city plans.
What other groups, like Parks Plan, is that very environmentally focused, or there are other groups that are very environmentally, because there are other sections, right? Actually,
Climate action plan
Yeah, the
wasn't,
climate action.
and the climate action plan didn't exist when this MMP was, when this was written.
Right. And so
Did you say other relevant city plans?
we've got lots of plans, but I think the parks plan got tied in with the mobility master plan because a lot of the park strategic plan gets implemented by our transportation system. So the green necklace that'll build lots of non-motorized facilities will actually be built within right of way for the street. So it'll be transportation projects. And so this is a way to acknowledge that the city has said building the green necklace and the other things inside the park strategic plan have been identified as a priority, and that the transportation system owns part of building that infrastructure for the community.
it is promote environment, so I mean, better access to parks, it's really.
Right.
And the action plan also doesn't call out specific projects. It's more specific goals.
Okay, I'm convinced. I think it's okay as it is. What do the rest of you think?
To address some of those comments, though, will it be useful to have like art projects included in the park strategic plan, or would improve access to parks? Just to address that whole comments about this.
But that's still just the park strategic plan. If you're still limiting it to parks, that's still the park strategic plan. I don't know that I guess.
So I think the comment would be let's say that there's a park, and maybe Squawk's a good example, where there's a park that people really need to walk to, I forget what it's called, but it doesn't have parking. Yes, Hillside Park. And so if a sidewalk connection to Hillside Park is not called out in the park strategic plan, it technically wouldn't score those 4 points. But having a non-motorized connection to a park without parking, one could argue is a community priority.
Then we're sort of starting to invent our board's view of what the park strategic plan should be.
Right.
That's where I think we either defer to them and say, it's that board's job. Or we say, no, we think we can do a better job and we go look at this more. I don't really like saying, because if we equally weight that, we're also de-weighting their strategic plan.
Just as many points for, even if you're not. So I'm gonna do a time check here at 7:54. Really like to get us out of here as close to 8 o'clock as possible. Just, I mean, I've heard some slight dissatisfaction with the way this is. Do we feel like,
I think we just want to address the comments.
But I
And just
think-
have a little discussion.
yeah, but I became convinced with your comment, that I'm satisfied. But I don't know about the rest of you. I think his argument makes me comfortable leaving it as is despite the comment. I'm satisfied. I think that when we were planning for this meeting, we were anticipating spending the most time on what we spent the most time on. But I do want to make a call for, and we obviously didn't get through everything. Is anyone here have anything on here that they made a note about, that they were concerned about, that you want to bring up before we? Because otherwise, I'm wondering, looking back to you guys, do you feel like we got to the stuff that you really wanted to get to?
For me, yes. And if there's a category we didn't get to that someone has some passionate feelings.
That's what I'm calling for. Yeah, but I wanted to first ask you guys. If
Yes,
you got what
feel
you
great
wanted.
about what we got.
Yeah, that includes you as well.
To note, I guess negotiable or but with the language. A lot of these are yes, no. Doesn't mean we can't change the evaluation criteria at least.
I'm sorry, Greg, what? I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was just flipping through it.
Were you comfortable that
Yeah.
you got what you needed from the tab? Because I want to make sure we finish the job. I'm trying to balance that with ending close to being on time.
Yeah, I feel good.
But there's nothing, no hot buttons you feel like we haven't hit.
Nope.
Okay. Does anyone have any hot buttons that we didn't get to that you feel important? How about you over there, Jerry? Anything that we didn't get to that you want to talk about? No. How about you, Erica? Okay, so I don't want to rush us, but if you guys are satisfied and no one else has any hot buttons, then I would like to move on. Is that okay? With you guys? Okay. So let's close on regular business. I think that was a really good discussion. I appreciate you coming and spending, taking this deep dive with us. I think this is important. And hopefully you got useful stuff. So then that brings us to item 5, and I'm wondering if, John, you have something you want to say about the board work plan?
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up anyway.
Right, did we want to talk about next steps, or we already talked about that?
Oh, I could just go over real quick. We got an environmental board meeting in a couple
Can you
weeks.
just back up a slide? I'm sorry. Oh, I think what happened is you switched control. We didn't let him finish about next steps.
Sorry.
Now we got Eric's.
Sorry.
He's got a 4-foot base.
We'll be at the environmental board in a couple weeks, and then we'll be back here at the end of March to review and comment on the projects that we'd like, that kind of make it way through the prioritization process. So we'll be able to review that. We'll take that to the city council's mobility and infrastructure in first half of May. have a public hearing in June, and then we'll adopt it in the next one.
Great, thanks. Now.
Sorry if you.
Oh,
I
go
have
ahead.
a question. Sorry if you like just said this, but when this goes on to the environmental board, are they're gonna get our comments too, or they like for like, I don't know, more objectivity, they don't see any of the like comments or suggestions that we've made?
They'll definitely hear our comments, Tab's recommendations for revisions, the reason for it, and make sure that they agree with it, or if they have additional comments on making sure that we're implementing the city's environmental goals.
Okay, but no, like, will they see our tab feedback, I guess, is what
Yes.
I'm asking. Okay.
Someone from our, you can also join the environmental.
Actually, I'm glad that you said that because I think we did briefly talk about that. I think if we could have a volunteer that attend that meeting, I will be out of town that week. But is there anyone that? It's up to Julian, you said a bit about that. How about you, Tom?
Let me check my whole calendar, but if I can, then I will.
It sounds like either maybe Julian and or Tom could go to that. I do think it's useful to hear. I mean, you guys do a good job transmitting our feedback, but sometimes it's also helpful to have the OG, the actual from the source. So if one of you guys could attend, and if you can't, I think it's okay. I think these guys are pretty good listeners and they'll be able to transmit, but I think if one of you guys could attend, that'd be awesome. Keep them in line. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on. Quickly. This is our board work plan. It has not gone to council yet. I will speak to that in a second. So obviously next month we have Greg and John coming back to talk to us about TIP again. Moving on to traffic calming hopefully in April, and then greenhouse inventory in May. So pretty simple. As far as announcements, so this has not gone to council yet, but it will be going to council on March 18th at the 7 p.m. meeting. I've been working with the clerk's office to determine what that looks like. Because was it going to be just on the consent calendar and go over it? Did we need to present in person, et cetera? So reading from the municipal code 2.92.050.1, duties and responsibilities, we're going to be literally taking it literally. The duties of the board shall include the following: creating an annual work plan in consultation with the mayor, city staff, and city council. Representatives of the tab will meet at least annually with the city council to discuss the annual work plan prior to it being finalized by the tab. So this is where I ask 1 to 3, or all of you if you wanted to, tab members to attend that meeting. The city council would love to have anyone show up to be present, give a comment if you want. I believe they're giving us 10 minutes at the beginning of that meeting to basically say, here's our work plan. Because it's built into the municipal code when tab was formed, I think we might be the only board that actually has to go to council physically. So you're all special is what I'm trying to say. So I would love to have some volunteers, if you can check your calendars.
What date is that?
March 18th at 7 p.m.
I'd come to.
Great.
I can
Cool.
probably be there.
Okay.
I'll be back by then.
Everyone can come. Yeah, so it'll only be a few minutes at the beginning of the meeting, so it won't be a huge commitment. So thank you. I appreciate that. Stop sharing the screen. Go back to anything else. So moving on to staff report. The only thing that I have are tab applications due March 7th. We have 2 folks that if they wanted to, can come back. Well, can apply to come back, I should say. So I think I sent you both an email today, just to let you know that they give you the link. So those are due March 7th. To the rest of you, if you know anyone who wants to apply, we have 3 open alternative positions, or I mean, they 2 open positions as well if we determine that. So just wanted to put that forward if you know anyone who might want to apply, especially youth members. I think that's it for me.
One thing, if you are interested in attending that city council meeting, please let John know so that way we can avoid a quorum.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So all of you can't come, just kidding. I forgot about the
Or I
quorum.
guess we could post it, but
That's right, that's right. There's gonna be a tab meeting at city council. Moving on to chair report, I just wanted to touch base with all of you about I think middle last year, I mentioned I wanted to kind of meet with each of you to chat. I kind of dropped the ball on that. I think I still have to meet with Dave, Jerry, Erica, and Micah, I believe, from this group. So I'll be reaching out. That's all I want to mention about that. We can move on to youth report if there is one. Great.
Chair.
I'm the chair.
Sorry. I was on a roll. I was on a roll. Sorry. I'll hand it back to you.
Actually, I was gonna mention that, but you already did about the, because you had sent us that note. So you hit one of the things I was gonna say. And then I will just say that, I do intend to reapply. But I do think that we should be in May, is I think when we elect ourselves a new chair and vice chair. I am really all about rotation of leadership. So somebody who's interested in chairing this, board should be thinking about that. I think it's time for someone to chair. Although I do like the role, but I'm happy that I think it's, well, thank you, but I think it's good to have some different people. And that's all I had for the chair report. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to mention one other thing, and that's about recruitment. So the nice thing about the alternate positions, those are only 2 years. And so there is no age. You can be young and be an alternate. You can only be a certain age to be in a youth seat, and there's only 1 youth seat. But the nice thing about those alternate positions, if you know any young people that are gonna be in town for 2 years and not off to college yet, it's so people going into their junior year, that's a great role because it happens to be 2 years, and it's not limited to people above a certain age. It could be, there's no age on that one, so it's not actually a youth seat. It's just a really good role for a young person who only has 2 years to commit because they may be going off to doing something else. So whereas ours are 3 years. So I wanted to mention that. And that's it. Do you have a youth report? Sorry. Okay. Okay. Do we have any other business or announcements?
I don't.
Sweet. Okay. And then I guess then we're adjourned.
I moved to motion adjourn.
We get to adjourn. Thank you. We have our Robert's.
We haven't been motioned to